In this video, I will be referencing and quoting from two different trials, the Duggar girls versus the City of Springdale case, and the United States of America versus Josh Duggar. This episode will also include longer clips and interviews from Jim and Bobye Holt, Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar, and the Homeland Security interview with Josh Duggar. This video discusses SA and Child SA. Viewer discretion is advised.
I remember it was early August of this year. We were in our living room, and we'd been visiting with Josh and Anna and the family at that time, and Jim, Bob, and I went upstairs, and I said to Jim, Bob, I said, you know what, I sense that something is not right in Joshua's heart. He seems like he has a real spirit of pride. And as a mama, that you just, in your heart, it breaks your heart. You sense things. And I said to Jim, I said, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on, but something is not right. I believe he has secret sin, and he's not repentant before God, and he's not sharing with Anna. And Dad and I prayed for him at that point, privately, alone, in our room. And then Dad said to me, he said, well, maybe you should go and talk to Joshua. And I said, I don't think I need to talk to Josh. I'm going to talk to our Heavenly Father, and I am going to cry out to God, and I'm going to pray and fast. And I remember as I asked God for scripture, because only the truth makes free. And as I asked God for a scripture for Joshua, this was the verse that God gave me.
On March 30th, 2003, couple Jim and Bobye Holt called off their daughter Kaleigh's courtship to then 15-year-old Josh Duggar. The Holts had been family friends of the Duggars for decades, as Jim Holt and Jim Bob grew up together. The Holts and Duggars were like family, and their children were best friends. They vacationed together, worshiped together, and thought they had a lifelong friendship.
How long have y'all known the Duggars?
I met Michelle when I was a cheerleader in junior high. And I graduated in 87, so that tells you how old I am. And she was also a cheerleader, but she's 3 years older than me, I believe. So I met her then, but I didn't hang out with her. I just literally ran into her. And then you tell how you met Jim Bob.
We started going to Shiloh in 7th grade, and I walked in, and we were all introducing ourselves, and that's how I met him. We were both 12, and we both, I think he went to Shiloh. Yeah, I know he went to Shiloh the year before, but I joined in 7th grade when they added 7th grade, and I've known him ever since.
In Kaleigh's court deposition, she informs the court how close her parents were to the Duggars, saying, quote, "Our dads, Jim, Bob, and my father were best friends growing up. They have known each other since they were 12. Kaleighh informs the court that the family spent a lot of time together, frequenting each other's homes. Like the Duggars, Kaleighh comes from a big family. She has 10 younger siblings. Together, the family spent much time in fellowship, worshiping and praising God. She said, quote, "Our families got together to worship the Lord. We didn't actually go to a building that had a pastor, that was an unofficial denomination or a congregation that was under a pastor. We did not go to church with them in that context. What we did do was go to their home or them to our home or other families that we knew and would talk about the Lord and pray and sing and attempt to have church."
The two families compose the core of what amounts to a homegrown church. Every Sunday, the Duggar living room is transformed into a meeting hall.
We just get together every week and we encourage each other and we pray together and study the Bible, and it's just a neat little fellowship.
The service at the Duggars and the home of the Duggars, the spirit is very sweet, and the whole church is like a big family.
There have been times this small church meeting has swelled to over 100.
In addition to the Holts and the Duggars, several families would attend these gatherings, with many coming in and out over the years. Naturally, each family grew closer as they shared the same belief system. As the family's friendship deepened, so did a budding romance between the Holt's daughter Kaleighh and the Duggars' eldest son Josh.
When the families get together, it's a chance for the kids and adults to relate to people who live life the way they do. Not an easy thing to find. Which leads us to a common question. How will the Duggars handle the delicate issue of dating? With lead son Josh, age 16, this issue is about to become more than theoretical.
We have met others that there might be an interest among our children. You know, they spend time together, never alone, for one thing, just boy and a girl alone. Ideally, we're in groups, and they usually are together with others when we're visiting with friends and that sort of thing. And so, in that respect, it's a protection for their heart, too.
I think I don't look at it as much as dating as I do looking for a lifelong partner. And I think that you can give your heart away to so many. And I think that if you're going to give your heart away, you need to be giving it to someone who's going to love you and care about you, and not someone who's going to simply get carried away with their emotions.
Our goal is for each one of our children to find that special person, just like I did. And we really believe that God's created that person already for them.
Eventually, 14-year-olds Kaeleigh and Josh were given permission by their parents to enter into a courtship. Kaeleigh stated, quote, "Well, at the time, we called it betrothal." The young couple received the approval from their fathers as the head of the household, and their mothers, under the authority of their husbands, agreed. In November 2002, the Holts considered 14-year-old Josh Duggar a suitable potential husband for their 14-year-old daughter Kaeleigh and allowed the two to court.
At one time, and I know this is very personal, but thank goodness your daughter Kaeleigh, she's married, she's happily married, she's off and away, but they were thinking of marrying Josh to your oldest daughter. Was that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
I want to make it clear that Kaeleigh and Josh were the ones that came to us about the other person. So she was interested in him, he was interested in us or her, and so we didn't set it up.
Right.
He came to us, and Josh went to his parents.
They were in church. They were in church together, and they were
raised together. I mean,
right.
They're the same age. They're just 2 days apart, and so
both sets of parents had high hopes for this matchup and were very optimistic for their future. Little did the Holts know, just 8 months prior, Josh was caught seeing his sister. Witness Bobye Holt told the court the following, quote, "From what Josh told me, it started at age 12. But he wouldn't get caught until February 2002, when he was 13 years old. One night, after sneaking into his sister's bedroom, he approached Jane Doe number 1 where she was sleeping. He then began going underneath her blankets and touched her chest and genital area with his hands. To his surprise, Jane Doe number 1 woke up and hit him in the face. She then immediately ran and told her parents what her older brother had done. When Josh was confronted by his parents, he confessed."
Take us back to 2002. How did you first learn that there was a problem with Josh?
Well, 12 years ago, we went through one of the most darkest times that our family's ever gone through. And our son Josh came to us on his own, and he was crying. And he had just turned 14. And he said that he had actually improperly touched some of our daughters. And
we were shocked. I mean, we were just devastated. I don't think any parent is prepared for trauma like that. And I think we had one ray of hope, and that Josh had a tender conscience, and he was the one that came and shared on his own, even though the others really didn't know anything of his wrongdoing.
This is a young boy who has come to you with shocking information. What did he say? I mean, how did you respond to him? What was that like, that exchange?
There was so much grief in our hearts. I think as parents, we felt, we're failures. You know, here we tried to raise our kids to do what's right, to know what's right. And yet, one of our children made some really bad choices. And I think as a parent, we were devastated.
Did he explain why? I mean, was that a question that you asked?
He said he was just curious about girls, and he had gone in and just basically touched them over their clothes while they were asleep, and they didn't even know he had done it. Mm-hmm. And so we went, and the first thing was to protect the girls. And so we went in.
The girls all sleep together?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the girls had 2 bedrooms at the time. But anyway,
how many girls were we talking about?
We had 5 girls at the time.
Okay.
And so, but anyway, he went in and said he had done this. And so we first off, of course, really talked to him, and then we went and talked to all the girls
because
and the children.
It was so important for us as parents to talk to our girls and make sure that nothing else had happened. And so
what did they say?
Well, one by one, as we talked with them, none of them were aware of Josh's wrongdoings.
So they learned about it from you?
Yeah.
Yes.
How, at that point, he had said that he had done this to how many of the girls?
That was to 2.
Okay. And so, but neither one had any recollection of it?
They did not know.
And what was their reaction when they learned it from you?
They really didn't know. And actually what happened was we asked them at first if anything happened, and then it was after some other things happened that we actually shared with them. And we took a lot of steps. And first we tried to deal with this in-house as parents. We were in shock, and we were trying to figure out what was the next step. But really, looking back, we did the best we could under the circumstances.
You're saying, what am I going to do? You're saying, he says he's touched 2 of the daughters, and you don't know what to do, right?
We didn't know, because at that point now, nobody knew about it, and besides Michelle and I and Josh. And so we thought, what do we do with this information? And the girls, we talked to them, and they didn't know that anything had happened because they were asleep. And so we talked to him. We put all kinds of punishments on him. We watched him all the time.
In court records, witness Bobye Holt stated that in 2005, Josh told her that, quote, Jane Doe number 1 snitched on him after she woke up to her brother touching her. Though Jim, Bob, and Michelle found out in February of 2002, it wasn't the first time Josh had touched his sisters. Jim and Bobye Holt would further elaborate.
Believe me, there's a lot of stuff that was confessed that night that hasn't even been out in public anywhere. Stuff that if we told you, there's a psychological...
What they actually saw leading up to when the March 30th
right, because they found out in
incident
February
happened with Jane Doe 4.
Yeah, they found out in February of 2002.
So in February of 2002, when Jim Bob found out, he was 13.
Right before he turned 14.
But that's not been really talked about. That they only think that he was 15 years old when it happened. No, he started when he was 12.
To deal with this disturbing situation, Jim, Bob, and Michelle took certain steps to ensure that this wouldn't happen again.
What was the dinner table like?
Well, we tried to make things as normal as we can, but also, Michelle and I both were keeping an eye on Josh, all the time, and watching his behaviors, watching his attitudes.
And prior to him leaving, were you concerned for the safety of your daughters?
Well, we definitely put safeguards in our home.
Yes, and we also talked to our daughters and reminded them about wrong and right touch, and about if anybody ever touched you in a wrong way, for you to come and tell your mom.
Immediately, we tell them that you have a safe place to share your heart. And so we were trying to protect and watch and make sure that their hearts were safe, they had a safe place to talk, and at the same time putting boundaries and safeguards up in our home.
Yeah, we weren't going to give up on Josh.
There were a lot of things that changed in our understanding as parents with, this first child, first son, to come to this place in his life. We're like, there's things that we've learned even since then that I think, you know what, we don't let boys babysit. We don't let, they don't play hide and seek together. 2 don't go off and hide. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we put in place, and we said, you're not alone in a room with someone else. You always be out visible, and little ones don't sit on big boys' laps or people that you don't know, or even family members, unless it's your daddy.
The safety measures the Duggars put into place wouldn't stop the teen from abusing more sisters. According to Bobye Holt, Josh also admitted to the following, quote, in regards to Jane Doe number 3, he did the same thing to her as he done to his other 2 sisters, which was touching the chest and genital area. When asked by prosecutors if Josh used his hands to do that, Bobye Holt said, quote, yes. Upon Josh's confession to these heinous crimes, he would provide further detail of these attacks. Josh told the Holts that he would commit these acts on the victims while they were asleep, but also when they were awake, and that he had done it on multiple occasions.
We were told He's a 15-year-old boy. He was very curious. We didn't let him have an outlet, so to speak.
During this time, Josh did not receive any intervention as far as therapy or counseling, nor did the victims. Instead, they would try to make it so that Josh wasn't left alone or around his victims. But that's hard to do when you live in a small house with 13 children. Jim, Bob, and Michelle would keep their son secret and act as if all was well in their family. The Duggars were quite busy this year, as they had made plans to build their big home on some commercial property they had purchased years prior. In addition, Michelle was pregnant with their 14th child, and the family was busier now more than ever.
Actually on the crest of that hill. No, that's not a small hotel or large restaurant. It's the Duggars' future home. And our next lesson.
Well, about a year and a half ago, we started here doing some dirt work and clearing this site off, and we decided to build a house out in the country. It's going to be about 7,000 feet, which will give us about 3 times the amount of space that we have currently. We thought this would be a good family project.
That's right, family project. With only occasional help from friends and experts, this house is being built pure Duggar mind and muscle. That is not to say there weren't doubts early in the process. When number one son Josh first heard of this construction plan, he had other ideas.
First, I was kind of like, oh, okay, we try it, and we started, and I was like, maybe we should just hire this stage done. So we did the steel, and then I said, well, why don't we hire somebody to do the roof? And he said, well, I think we can do it. And I was like, we've never done this before. It's really dangerous. And he's like, well, I think we can do it. So we did it. And I said, oh, we did it. The next stage and the next day I kind of said, well, okay, I think we can do it now. So I'm trying to get that confidence too. But now on the drywall, I still think we should hire that done. So
In November 2002, 8 months after Jim, Bob, and Michelle were made aware of Josh's abuse towards his sisters, the couple welcomed Justin, their 14th child. Kaeleigh and Josh had begun courting during this time. The family was in the process of building their dream home, and all seemed well. But one phone call on March 30th, 2003 would change everything. After receiving a phone call from Jim, Bob, and Michelle, Bobye Holt recounts the following story. Quote, in March 2003, Jim Bob called my husband and asked us to come over. When we arrived at the house, the only people I saw were Michelle, Jim Bob, and Josh Duggar. The Duggars were in distress, as they had a very disturbing situation to deal with and sought help from their trusted friends. As the Holts entered the Duggar home, they immediately sensed the tension in the room, as Jim, Bob, and Michelle were quite panicked. They informed the Holts that Josh had some disturbing information to share that would ultimately affect his relationship with Kaeleigh. In court testimony, Bobye Holt states the following, quote, Jim Bob told us that the disclosure Josh was going to share would probably end his relationship with our daughter, Kaeleigh. The Holts were dumbfounded, as they had no clue what Josh could have done that would ruin his relationship with their daughter, but they would soon find out. 15-year-old Josh Duggar was about to tell his potential in-laws what he had done. Earlier that day, while the Holts were out at a friend's house, Josh called Jim Holt in hopes of speaking with him. There was a problem that Josh was suppressing and sought help from his trusted advisor.
The whole thing started that night is we were at a friend's house. And Josh called my phone.
Oh my goodness, we were at the 5th victim's house.
Yes, we were at the 5th victim's house. Josh called my phone, and all of our kids were there. And Josh called, and I answered, and he goes, hey, Aunt Bobby, I need to talk to Uncle Jim. And I said, Josh, we are at a friend's house eating dinner. He is in the back room talking. I am not going to let you interrupt. You can wait until we get back.
Well, yeah, but I think that was the second time he called?
No, that was the first time.
Oh, okay.
And then he said, well, can I talk to Kaeleigh? And I was like, I thought a second. I thought, you know what? If she puts it on speakerphone and she hangs around with everybody there, I said, you can only talk to her for just a minute because she's here with her girlfriends.
It's getting late.
You let her stay here and visit with her girlfriends. You can talk to her another time. Well, come to find out, he was tempted. He was tempted that night, and he was trying to call to not follow through with it. And evidently, after he got off the phone with Kaeleigh, he did it anyway.
After speaking to Kaeleigh, Josh ended the phone call and decided to have Bible study with his siblings. Jim, Bob, and Michelle had safety measures in place to protect the girls from Josh. For some reason, though, on this particular day, they allowed Josh to babysit. During Bible study, he placed his younger sister, Jane Doe number 4, on his lap. Witness Bobye Holt details what happened. Quote, Josh explained that Jane Doe number 4 was sitting on his lap during Bible time, and he touched her inappropriately. He told us that he touched her genital area. He did not tell me that he touched her under the clothes at that point. He told me he touched her over her clothes with his hands.
See, things like that just prove the extent of the problem. Like, I'm tempted. This is well planned out. I'm going to call somebody, and I'm still going to do it.
Well, I'm going to try to get out of it, but I think
he
was
started to do Bible time.
I think he was,
and that's what he was trying to do, was have the Bible time so that he wouldn't do it. But then he put her on his lap.
Well, we're just speculating, and that's another thing.
No, that's what he said.
Well, remember when they told us later about that they found out in February of 2002, they go, we put precautions in place, and they didn't work.
No, and we didn't really even notice them.
Well, what precautions can you have in a small house with that many kids? And
well, I think
he
they
should
locked
have
the
never
doors.
been babysitting.
No,
he was babysitting.
They were said he was
not a babysitter.
He was told that he
There
wasn't
was
allowed to
no
babysit
babysitter
anymore.
that
I
night.
guess they thought he was doing better, and they did it.
I mean,
They thought he was doing better, so they let him go and do it again.
So they had babysitters to basically babysit him, not the other kids.
Well, I don't know. Maybe they were telling him the siblings.
That's kind of how it seems. Is like,
there was right. He was the babysitter.
Which, how irresponsible and ignorant is that? But I digress.
In 2003, after Josh confessed to the Holts what he had done to 5 victims, 4 of his sisters and another unknown female, Jim Holt told Jim Bob that they needed to get Josh out of the house and away from the girls.
The night we found out was the night he left the home. When he left the home, there was a discussion.
It was a Sunday night.
There was a discussion of, it was between Clark Wilson, Jim, and Jim Bob. And it was, where could they take him? Clark suggested that they go to where Jim was a youth sex offender
I don't remember
counselor.
if he said that.
And Jim was just like,
it's not Christian based. I don't know if you want to go there. Plus, you have to go through the court
Plus,
system.
that's not how it works. You had those kids that are there were already found guilty, and then that's why
they had went through the system.
Yeah, it's a court-appointed thing.
And so we all felt if he had committed a crime, he needed to go through the system. He went down to Little Rock and stayed at a youth facility, and our understanding was that the director was going to do an interview with him, do all the stuff that like a counselor would do, and find out actually what he did, and then take the steps that he was supposed to have taken.
Unbeknownst to the Holts, the facility Josh was sent to was an IBLP facility where instead of being counseled by a licensed therapist, he was sent to do construction on the old Veterans Hospital that the IBLP was gifted.
Looking back now, it was definitely something that Jim Bob suggested. Jim Bob pushed. Jim Bob said, hey, let's put him here. And it was an IBLP facility. It was. We didn't know it at the time.
They were renovating the old, I think it was the old Veterans Administration Hospital in Little Rock. And it was this huge, skyscraper.
So when they say construction on somebody's home, that's not what it was. It was the IBLP old Veterans Hospital that IBLP was given.
Well, I think I knew at the time because I said, he's got to go through the system. You really can't send him there. Plus, it's not kind of Christian based because that's what we thought would be good.
After driving all night to Little Rock, Jim Holt returned home where he sat Kaeleigh down and informed her about what had happened at the Duggars' house. In her deposition, Kaeleigh states the following, quote, after my parents came home and informed us about what had happened, we talked about accountability, so having open conversation with people that we trust if we ever felt threatened or were violated.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that they told you because they were worried he was going to tell Kaeleigh or might have already told her?
I don't think so.
No.
But I remember that night on March 30th, they had brought us over because they said, I'm like, the reason we're telling you this is because Josh is,
Michelle.
Michelle, that Josh is in a relationship with Kaeleigh.
Right. That was the reason they
because of
only
that-
told us, because they know he had done it before and never told us before then.
Yeah, that's
But
a story
because
in
he
itself.
cheated on Kaeleigh, that's why we were involved.
Right.
After a few months of doing construction on the Veterans Hospital, Jim Bob picked Josh up from the facility and brought him back home, which to the Holts was a slap in the face. At that time, the Duggars were in discussion to appear in Parents magazine, and Jim Bob wanted Josh home to participate.
In July, when he was going to bring him home for his birthday, all of us were like,
For Jim Bob's birthday.
no, yes, for Jim Bob's birthday. We were like, no. And so when he was able to just check him out and bring him home, we were like, something is shady, right? How can that just happen if he went down there for a crime and he just checks him out and brings him home and keeps him home? That was just
Red flag.
it was a red flag. And then we started just, asking some questions. And of course when you ask questions, you don't really know what to ask and you don't get a lot of straight answers. And so,
Well, at that time we trusted him. He was
Right.
like our best buddies.
Right.
And as far as we knew, he'd never lied to us.
Jim Holt, at the time, was a chaplain at a juvenile sex offender facility prior to this happening, and he heavily encouraged Jim Bob and Josh to turn themselves into the police.
So that was July. So then all this time we're getting a little bit more information because we didn't get all of the information right when he came home. So we're a little bit through the summer and through the fall, we get more and more information. And Jim was just like, if he has not been turned in, Josh hasn't been turned in, Jim Bob, you need to encourage him to turn himself in, or you need to turn him in. So Jim literally kept telling him over and over and over again, he needs to be turned in if the other guy didn't do it.
And finally, I told
the
Bobby,
director down in the
I told Bobby, I said, if he doesn't turn himself in, I'm going to do it. And I just kept praying and hoping that he would turn him in. And he did.
How did you choose the person to whom you would surrender him? Because there's been some question about whether you chose a friend, someone who you knew would go easy on him.
Yeah. Now, I had a towing business for years, and so I did know a lot of the officers around here. But we went into the Arkansas State Police and
At police headquarters.
at the police headquarters, walked in, this man was there. We went in and talked to him and said, hey, my son has something that he needs to share with you. And we actually took a witness with us. We went in and sat down, and he shared everything.
He told it all.
He told everything. And we had no idea that what that officer was going through on his own.
So the audience knows that officer is now in jail for 56 years for child pornography charges. Did you have any idea he was involved in any
We
of
had
that
no
at the time?
idea.
That came out years later. I mean, we were like shocked to read that in the.
So to critics who say, oh, they chose that guy
No,
because they
we had
thought
no
he'd be
idea.
sympathetic.
I didn't know
Not true.
anything about this guy besides that he was an officer there at the headquarters.
And now from prison now where he's serving for child pornography, he says, well, he only told me about one incident, and that's why he didn't pursue charges.
I was questioning why in the world would he say that? Maybe he could get out on parole or something sooner, because he actually violated the law in this case himself by not reporting it.
The bottom line is you went to a law enforcement official, you reported it, Josh told him what you say, he told him everything.
Everything.
5 victims.
Matter of fact, we took a friend with us because we wanted to make sure that we had a witness that would that would verify that we had shared everything.
I know you've said that he gave Josh a stern lecture.
He did. What he did.
He
I didn't know what he was going to do.
fear of God in Josh.
Yes.
And
Did he warn him that the law could come after him?
He said, and if you continue down this path, you're going to destroy your life and you could end up in prison.
Contrary to Jim Bob's version that the police officer gave Josh a stern talking to and put the fear of God in him, Kaeleigh has a different version. She states that according to her father, who accompanied Jim Bob and Josh to the police station and was with them when Josh made his confession, said that Josh received a slap on the wrist and was sent on his way. She says, quote, my dad told me that the police officer was like, well, thank you for coming to us and talking about it, and we trust that you won't ever do it again. And they let him leave. That's my understanding of how that went, says Kaeleigh. This situation began to drive a wedge in their relationship. Kaeleigh states, quote, after what happened with Josh, there was a lot of distrust between our families and our communication with each other. We still went to the same church gathering, family gatherings, whatever you want to call it, and we did for several years. But the relationship was always strained, It never went back to where it was before.
So did the struggles with the friendship start from that point on?
Well, we had a huge discussion with them about Jim Bob wanted Josh home for his birthday. And all of us, all the people in the church were telling him, this is not long enough for him to be in counseling. I mean, none of the people in the church went down to see him because they were still just shocked.
And this is what's so hard for people to understand. They're seeing this situation from looking at it right now. And they've maybe followed it through.
Yes.
But I told Jim Bob, and Bobby was in the room with me, I was like, do you realize, and this is something that people don't know, in 2003 when he was going to bring Josh back, it wasn't for the television show. It was for a Parents Magazine interview.
Right.
And I literally told him, I said, you know, what is going to happen when they ask, where's Josh? And he said, well, we already told him that Josh is having some struggles and he's down a Little Rock and talking to people. And I'm like, Jim Bob, he didn't struggle. He failed. Now at that time, Jim Bob had been a friend of mine and just a great example to me in my mind since I was 12 years old in this family. And I was the kid that didn't have a dad. And so I kind of bounced around from house to house, and Jim Bob's family kind of took me in. And so I was really grateful for that investment that they made in our lives. So when somebody sees what he has become now, that's not necessarily the person that I see. I remember the times where
you hung around with.
We rode our bicycles in the Piggly Wiggly parking lot over by his house on Ross Street.
In 2004, their documentary, 14 Kids and Pregnant Again, aired and took off. The Duggars became a sensation overnight. A few elders in their church knew of Josh's issues and became advisors for him to express his transgressions to if he needed. Kaeleigh stated, quote, I think they tried to establish communication with other men that they trusted to help him work through those issues. I cannot recall how many there were at the time. It was still a smaller group of people at the time. I know that he talked to Perry Butcher and my dad and Jim Bob, but I don't remember who else knew about it at that time. When Kaeleigh asked Josh what the elders would talk to him about and the kind of treatment and advice they offered him, she stated, quote, Josh told me that they got on him. They gave him wise advice. They encouraged him to be a better man and that he would confess his transgressions to them. After Josh confessed to the elders what he had done, he was instructed to cut his hair, Kaeleigh confirms in court records. The Duggars and Kaeleigh maintained a relationship because they still saw her as their soon-to-be daughter-in-law. But in 2005, that would change. After discovering another secret Josh had, Kaeleigh broke things off. In court records, Kaeleigh stated the following, quote, Josh was still looking at adult content and was lying about it, and it was more the lies that I was done with. I understand that people look at it and people are okay with doing that. But for us, in our relationship, it wasn't, and I was not okay with being lied to about it. And I think that I couldn't trust him anymore, and that I also felt taken advantage of. I was 17, maybe 18. I had just had enough of the issues that were happening. Josh made a comment to me that made me feel as if he took advantage of my feelings for him, and it made me aware that I just felt really used emotionally, and I was just done. Kaeleigh resolved her feelings for Josh and permanently shut the door on having any romantic relationship with him. She would then document the Duggar situation in her journal. She stated, quote, I wrote a letter to an author, kind of getting my emotions out. It was more like a journal page, but just so happened to be to the author of a book I was reading at the time. And I guess I put it back in the book. I don't remember doing this, but I put it back in the book and put it back on my shelf from the first initial 2003 event. And so it had been there for many years. And then I lent the book out to a friend in 2006, not remembering that the letter was in there. And when that letter was discovered, the girl that I had lent it to told her parents, and her parents told others. And then there was a whole group of people that knew about it at the time. The friend Kaeleigh lent her books to was Gabby Reno. According to Kaeleigh, when she wrote the journal entry, she had no intention of actually sending the letter. It was more therapeutic in a way. She said, quote, I write a lot. I journal, and so I write my feelings. And that was basically a journal page to the author of the book that I had read. So I had not intended on sending it. In the letter, Kaeleigh wrote that Josh had molested his sisters. When this information came out in their community, Kaeleigh asked for the letter back. She was told by the Renos that they burned it. When the secret came out, the Duggars distanced themselves from the church. Kaeleigh stated, quote, and they kind of just left the family church gathering. And then some people kind of pursued them like, hey, we miss you. What's going on? Why haven't you been coming? And then people kind of kept talking about it, about what had happened. And I can't remember if Oprah was alerted by DHS or a private person alerted her. I can't remember for sure how that happened.
In December 2006, things nearly unraveled. With the family in Chicago and about to go on the Oprah Winfrey Show, someone leaked the story of Josh Duggar's behavior to Oprah's production company. Writing in part, "You need to know the truth. They are not what they seem to be." Harpo Studios faxed the letter to authorities, and a police investigation was formally opened.
The Duggars were scheduled to appear on the Oprah talk show to promote their own show when the studio received the following redacted email on December 7, 2006. It read, quote, "Before you air the Duggar family from Arkansas, you need to know the truth. They are not what they seem to be. Blank has molested blank while blank was sleeping, and the parents have been hiding the secret for a long time. Jim Bob lies to his church and his friends to make him look good. At this moment, he is in trouble with the church for lying about blank and things that concern the way the church members reacted. I think that you should know the truth before they make a complete fool of you and your show. They have been on TV before and come across as a perfect family, which couldn't be further from the truth. They jump from show to show to receive gifts for their family and to make them look really good too. Please consider this and confront them about their secret." After receiving this disturbing email, Oprah's teams forwarded the email to the hotline and canceled their taping with the Duggars. The Duggars were then forced to go in and speak with local authorities, where the girls detailed their abuse in confidential interviews. Josh was also interviewed, as well as Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar. Kaleigh's reputation took a turn for the worse when this came out. She was blamed by fellow church members for this scandal, including Jim Bob and Michelle. She said, quote, "I had a conversation with Jim Bob and Michelle about it. There were some other family members that were pretty upset about that also. Michelle's niece, Rachel Hutchins, had come up to me, and she was really angry, blaming me and asked me, basically, how I could have messed up to where Josh would have not wanted me anymore. The people that were upset about it had blamed me and that basically Josh didn't deserve me because I had gossiped."
And I remember when Kaeleigh and Josh broke up, it was all over that our daughter Kaeleigh was the one that was immoral. And what did Kaeleigh do? That the Duggars would break up with Kaeleigh, and we bore that for quite some time.
Jim Bob would also blame Jim and Bobye Holt for this entire situation. In her court deposition, Kaeleigh stated the following, quote, "Jim Bob believed that my parents were responsible for it happening, and I know that they were confronted by Jim Bob and Michelle Duggar about that. Jim Bob said that my dad was jealous of him, or that he was trying to get back at him for what Josh did to me. All of this was happening when the Duggars were being investigated by authorities in 2006. The Duggars church became very divided, with Kaeleigh saying that, quote, "There were basically three groups of people. People that felt like they should not have been turned in, people that felt like they should have been turned in, and then the group of people that wanted to stay out of it entirely. And so it kind of split from there."
The Duggars were good at hiding it from the people they went to church with. That was very obvious. Nobody could believe when we tried to warn them about maybe their children, being in danger or watch out for certain people. They're like, "Well, how can you say that? These people are really pure and holy." And one of the things that they talked about was he was bitter because of the last race. Well, that's one of the things that, the Duggars said about us, is that we were jealous and that we were bitter at them because of what they did to our daughter, and that we were jealous of them, of their fame and their money. And how do you debate that? How do you combat that? The only thing that can show that's over a period of time. And we continue to love on them and try to befriend them. But sometimes, the Bible talks about, Mark, that these 6 things, Proverbs 6:16 through 19 says, "These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him, a proud look, a lying tongue." And the 10 Commandments, it doesn't talk about there, it says, "Thou shalt not lie." It doesn't say that. It says, "Thou shalt not bear false witness." In other words, bearing false witness can be manipulation. It can be misleading someone. And so when you play the victim and not address the situation and say, "Look, we have a legitimate concern. This really has happened." And then the other person, instead of acknowledging it and say, "Yeah, that really did happen," they don't say that. They say, "Oh, they're just bitter, or they're just jealous, or they're being a bully, or they're being mean." They're not. What we heard a lot was, "You're not being very loving. You're not being very Christ-like." And I'm like, the Bible says to do justice and judgment to the Lord is more acceptable than sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And we don't mind, the thing is we've just seen it to be over and over a pattern of minimizing and shifting the blame.
The Duggars would continue filming their show, which brought them a lot of fame, money, and success. They would quietly tuck this secret away and move on as if it didn't happen. They actually would go on almost a decade before it was brought up again. But this time, it wouldn't be kept in their circle. The whole world now would know. In 2015, Jim Bob would receive a tip that news outlet In Touch magazine would be running a story that included the 2006 police report detailing Josh's abuse of his sisters. The Duggar girls were instructed by their parents to not speak to anyone about the situation. This wouldn't hold up for long, as Jim Bob would orchestrate an interview where he, along with his wife Michelle and 2 of Josh's victims, would publicly speak up and defend Josh Duggar. It's important to note that in court depositions, one of his victims admits that the girls were coached and told what to say for this interview.
In 2008, you launched a reality TV show. What would make you launch a reality TV show about your family, given this past?
Back early on, it was after all this was taken care of in 2002, 2003. We actually had a magazine that came to Michelle and said, "Hey, can we do a story about your family?" And we said, yes, that would be fine.
But are you thinking at all, wait, this might not be a good idea? Because when you bring cameras into your home, they tend to discover things and people get more interested in you.
We had nothing to hide. We had taken care of all that years before. And when they asked us to do the reality TV show, all this had been taken care of 5 years before. And we had a clean bill of health from the state. We had said you'd gone through counseling, you had told the police.
Did any of the girls or did Josh say, whoa, hold on, Mom and Dad, hold on?
We had no fear because everything was taken care of. And that was a suit, that was actually a sealed juvenile record. Mm-hmm. And they had told us that all this stuff was done as a juvenile. This was all stuff that was sealed. And this is stuff that under law, there's no way that this could ever be brought out.
Did you live in fear that it might come out?
I don't know that we lived in fear because we'd all resolved it. It had been forgiven. We moved on with life.
When you heard that in late May, that the story had broken, that you hadn't been given a heads up by any of the official police involved, that they were going to do this, what was your reaction?
I said, God, I know that there's a lot of families out there that are hurting. And you know what? This isn't something we wanted to come out. But if people can see that Josh, who did these very bad things when he was a young person, that God could forgive him for these terrible things, then I hope other people realize that God can forgive them and also make them a new creature.
Do you think the show will be canceled? Has TLC given you any indication?
At this point, our family is just trying to regroup from these attacks. And when you're in every newspaper and everything throughout the world, it's been an unprecedented attack on our family. And it was actually, this information was released illegally. And so I wonder why all this press is not going after the system for releasing these juvenile records.
I think what's so devastating as a mama for me is we took our children to the safety center, the Children's Safety Center. We trusted them. We trusted the police department. Our children poured out their hearts. They shared everything. And then to have their trust betrayed and for all of their information and everything they'd shared to be turned over to a tabloid, for those things to be twisted and shared in a slanderous way, story after story, tabloid after tabloid. As a mom, that breaks my heart for my girls because I think this is such a horrible, they've been victimized more by what has happened in these last couple of weeks than they were 12 years ago because they didn't even understand or know that anything had happened until after the fact when they were told about it. And so I think we haven't, in our hearts before God, we haven't been keeping secrets. We have been protecting those that honestly should be protected. And now what's happened is they've been victimized by people with an agenda and for whatever profit they think they're going to get. But in this, one thing I know is that God is going to use all of this for good.
When this information came out, the Duggar show was canceled, and they received a lot of backlash. Jim Bob blamed the Holts for their show being canceled. Upon the cancellation of their hit show 19 Kids and Counting, Jim Bob and Michelle quickly began communicating with TLC in hopes of creating a new show. Eventually, after much discussion, TLC rebranded 19 Kids and Counting as Counting On, which initially was meant to document the older girls, how they were handling the scandal, their marriages and pregnancies.
Duggar has publicly confessed that he had molested 5 underage girls, including his own sisters, when he was a teenager. TLC eventually pulled the plug on the family's television show, 19 Kids and Counting, but now the network will air a, quote, special series featuring the sisters, the very ones he had accused, and that, I guess, is going to chronicle some of the aftermath of that abuse. Take a look. Counting On premieres in December. We're going to be stronger, not without a lot of treatment, I'm going to tell you that, because they're in massive denial. They're identifying with the perpetrator. And it is like a Stockholm syndrome. It's very similar to that. But you love the parents, right, Jenny?
Oh, God, I think this family is a mess, and I used to watch it.
What?
I did watch the show.
Yikes.
But it's really,
Yikes.
to me, there is an element of sickness, or many elements of sickness, from the how the parents chose to live their lives. And the wife recently spoke out. Michelle Duggar said that it's a wife's duty to have sex with her husband always. Like, no matter what.
See,
she could be vomiting and then sex available, sex ready.
The sisters, Josh Duggar's victims, would subsequently pursue a lawsuit against the city of Springdale for releasing the 2006 police report. As we know, Josh Duggar was arrested on April 29, 2021, on charges for viewing and receiving child abuse material.
How about in your residence? Electronics there?
Electronics? What do you mean by that?
Like computers, phone, other phones, anything like that?
I mean, my wife has a phone.
You got email accounts?
Yes.
What would that be?
So my email is joshuaduggar@icloud.com. It's my full name.
But for the reason of why we're here today, what are we talking about? Electronics on scene.
Okay.
So you have your cell phone, right?
Right, my cell phone, and then there's a laptop in that RV over there.
Okay. Now let's do one by one. The phone, that was one that you had in your pocket, right?
Right, in my pocket.
Who else has access to that phone?
Well, depending on sometimes I have a guy that works with me. He'll take pictures sometimes with the phone.
So outside of you, other people will possibly have. Is it password protected?
Yeah, it's not very secure. I mean, everybody knows it.
I want to make sure again that we're clear. When you say Tor, my definition, there's kind of
I actually don't know the definition, so I don't really want to.
The TOR stands for the onion router, which is basically the dark web and the deep web.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever heard of the dark web.
I've heard people talk about it.
Right, but then there's torrent. So two different things.
Okay.
Peer-to-peer, that falls into torrent files. So you have peer-to-peer files, which is software that you can download and you can exchange files with users all over the world. Tor, T-O-R, standing for the onion router, is the dark web. That's a program that's where you can surf the internet anonymously and get on all these different sites. So do you know?
I don't know which. I don't know. He said Tor, so I don't really know which one.
That's fine. I just want to make sure I'm not, when you say Tor, I'm not thinking dark web, and while you're thinking peer-to-peer or vice versa.
No, I don't. So you're saying what? So are you saying what? I guess I'm still confused.
In terms of the peer-to-peer,
he said you can download. I don't actually know. So I guess I better not. Not say if I don't understand.
And I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming because you said that they have peer-to-peer programs on these devices, that he was talking about torrent files, not TOR. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is somebody communicating?
We do a lot of things with Homeland Security investigation. We enforce over like 400 different federal statutes. Immigration, narcotics, gangs, and part of the other stuff we do is child exploitation. So we kind of work with saving kids essentially. A lot of times we'll find through internet tips that people have, downloaded child pornography,
Okay.
stuff like that. And
So is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying is going on?
Well, so what we're saying is there is a possibility that there are pieces to this puzzle where we might be able to help save children. Okay. And that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
All right.
So what is the scope is what I've been trying to say. Like, is there something going on my devices where that's been something's accessed or something's downloaded or uploaded or something like that?
That's what led us here. Yes.
Okay. Does it include, so did it mark this IP address? Is that basically what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess in the scope of your investigation, is there going to be, you'll narrow it down. You'll be able to figure out probably which device or which thing, or at least know if it's any of these devices that are here.
Well, that's what you see all these other guys running around doing. There are computer forensic analysts. So like even if something's on a computer that someone might have downloaded and then deleted, they're going to be able to find it. They've been doing that. That's what they do,
Yep.
So.
And I know Agent Aycock had kind of alluded to the fact that what we do, but we're part of a specialized task force, and that task force is called the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force.
Yep.
Based on an ongoing investigation, we were able to directly connect, actually one of our task force affiliates in the Eastern District was able to directly connect to a certain IP address that was participating in the uploading and sharing of known videos and images of child pornography.
Okay.
That information was then sent to us because the IP geolocated back into the Western District, somewhere in Northwest Arkansas.
So it was transmitting or receiving?
At this point, I probably best that you just listen, okay?
Okay.
We were able to get from this IP address one specific video of child pornography and one folder containing approximately 65 images of child pornography from a specific IP address. We then, once that information was turned over to us, because of the fact that it was geolocated in Northwest Arkansas, we served a federal summons for that IP address. That IP address came back to Ozarks Go with a subscriber of Joshua Duggar with cell phone. I'm assuming that's personal cell phone. With that email address that you just mentioned. Now it came back to a P.O. box.
Okay.
Based on all that information, we were able to determine that this was the business where downloads of child pornography had occurred. It came from, or it occurred on two separate dates, which are believed to be approximately May 14th and May 15th of 2019 through a uTorrent software. And that's why I was asking you earlier to make sure we understood or we're on the same page with what TOR is, Tor, and what torrent is.
So they're being, I guess I have quite a few questions about it, but I don't know, how much you can divulge, but I'm curious, you're saying there's images being uploaded or images being downloaded?
That the IP address from this lot had child pornography associated to it in a peer-to-peer software program. And our task force affiliate was able to download that video and images from the folder of the IP address to this.
Gotcha.
This thing. Well, that's one of the things too, and I know Agent Aycock had also spoke about this briefly. Those individuals you see walking around, we didn't just decide to wake up this morning and come here. So we did our homework, and we've been doing this for almost a decade now. We're pretty good at what we do.
I appreciate the work you guys do.
Thank you. But these forensic guys are some of the best in the country.
That's great.
What they do is they take electronic devices and they, through third-party software, or through certain forensic software, without altering or deleting anything that's on those electronic devices, can go in and see a digital fingerprint of anything and everything that's ever happened. So if there's an electronic device, and that's why we're trying to get ahead of the game, if there's an electronic device that possibly might have this video or images or anything associated like that's on it, we'd like to know now, because once we leave here today, it's kind of the end of our conversation and we wrap everything up. and then we don't have anything else to go on other than, no, I don't know anything about it. And then we see it, and it's like, okay, well, we had an opportunity to talk about that.
Right.
Why wasn't it addressed then?
Right.
You see what I'm getting at?
Right.
But as long as you're confident that there's no, or at least...
Because I don't want to be... I've watched my friends, answer things, and they get them for conspiracy or for something, and I'm not... I know the federal statutes are broad, and there's a lot of things to it, and I'm not going to say anything that's going to...
We don't
incriminate me or anything at all. I don't want to... I'm not... I'm not denying guilt, and I'm not saying that I'm... as far as anything goes, I don't want to say the wrong thing.
At the end of the day, you need to protect yourself.
Yeah, I don't want to say that I'm guilty or not. I'm just not saying, on accessing inappropriate content at some point, at any point in my life.
Upon Josh's arrest in 2021, the Duggar girls provided testimony for their lawsuit against the city of Springdale. We will now take a look at some of their testimonies. Question. With regard to Josh's abuse of you and your sisters, you don't blame yourself in any way related to any of that, do you? Jill says, quote, I don't know. Question. How did Josh's recent arrest affect you, if at all? Jill says, quote, obviously it was sad to hear about what had happened, or what was transpiring, but I wouldn't say that it deeply affected me. Question. Did Josh ever make amends to you or any of your sisters? Jessa said, quote, yeah. I would say, he asked for forgiveness and, yeah. Your relationship isn't instantly just, one of trust. But I think over time, we didn't have an issue with one another. It wasn't ongoing after that. And I wanted to believe he was changing for the better. Question. What do you think about that now? Jessa said, quote, I guess we'll see. Question. What do you think of your parents' handling of the allegations? Jessa said, quote, I think in hindsight they would say they probably could have done better, but I think that they were trying to do the best they knew how. Question. Shouldn't the public be aware of a sexual predator in their community who has sexually abused at least 5 people? Ginger said, quote, yes. Question. Where does your relationship with Josh stand as we sit here today? Joyanna said, quote, could you be more specific with that? Question. When was the last time you saw Josh? Joyanna said, quote, it would probably be 3 or 4 months ago. Question. Have you ever considered suing your brother? Joyanna said, quote, no. Question. Have you forgiven Josh? Joyanna said, quote, yeah. Question. Why? Joyanna said, quote, I think forgiving and trusting are 2 completely different things. And I have forgiven him so that I feel like if I become bitter over it, then that's going to make my life worse. It's not going to do anything for me. But I think forgiving and trusting are different things. And yes, I've forgiven him for what he's done to me, but I don't trust him. Question. Do you think the public should be concerned about sex offenses against minors? Joyanna said, quote, yes. Question. Has Jill, to your understanding, forgiven Josh? Derek said, quote, to my understanding, yes. Question. Has she explained her thought process in doing so to you? Derek said, quote, because that's the right thing to do. I assume that she's forgiven him because it's consistent with her faith. Question. Do you think the public ought to know when a sexual predator commits multiple acts of sexual abuse against children? Jeremy stated, quote, I'm not sure. Question. Do you think Josh Duggar is a sexual predator? Jeremy stated, quote, I'm not sure. Question. Did you know prior to May 2015 that Josh had molested other of your sisters and maybe somebody outside the family? Ginger said, quote, yes. Question. How did you learn about that? Ginger said, quote, my parents. During Josh's pre-trial, Jim Bob, his father, was called to the stand. Let's take a look at his deposition. Question. In 2002, where did you live? Answer. Let's see, I think we lived on Johnson Road. Question. Can you explain to the court the layout of that home there on Johnson Road? Answer. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. Question. In 2002, approximately how many children did you have? Answer. In 2002, we probably had, I think it was like 13. Question. Whenever Josh came to you to talk about his inappropriate touching of his sisters, did you live on Johnson Road or did you live in the new house? Answer. Johnson Road. Well, I like to say too that, this was something for a young man to come forward. Question. Mr. Duggar, do you remember making or doing an interview with Megyn Kelly back in approximately 2015? Answer. Yes. Question. And during that interview, did you speak to Megyn Kelly about things that Josh Duggar, your son, had done to Jane Doe 1, Jane Doe 2, Jane Doe 3, and Jane Doe 4? Answer. Yes. Question. Is it true that Josh Duggar came to yourself and your wife Michelle in approximately 2002 to disclose that he had inappropriately touched a minor? Answer. Correct. Question. Can you please tell the court what Josh told you? Answer. He had told me that he had touched some of the girls, like when they were sleeping, like on the breast, or like over their clothes. They didn't wake up. Question. So he made those statements to you. What did you do? Answer. I can't recall exactly how he said it. Question. But just a minute ago, you said that he came to you and said that he inappropriately touched them on the breast while they were sleeping. Answer. Correct. But he didn't say it in that exact, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but that was the synopsis of what happened. Yes. Question. So he made those statements to you. What did you do? Answer. I mean, it's been like 18, 19 years ago, so I don't remember exactly all the details. I mean, it's been a long time ago, but I mean, there was kind of a sequence of what we did as parents. And I mean, we were shocked that this had happened, but we were thankful that he came to us on his own and told us, because we wouldn't have known had he not told us. So my wife and I got together and we, over a period of time, we eventually ended up calling the elder of our church. Question. What do you remember him telling you in that subsequent disclosure that he made? Answer. Okay. The way I remember it, it was like he touched the breast when someone was sleeping, and I don't remember which one or whatever, but anyway, that did, yeah. Question. Do you remember Josh telling you that he had touched the vaginal area of one of those minors? Answer. No. Question. You don't remember that? Answer. No. When asked about the details in the 2006 police report, Jim Bob stated, quote, I can't remember. I didn't write the police report. I don't remember what was stated, and I haven't read it in many, many years. When asked by the prosecutor to read the 2006 Springdale police report, Jim Bob refused and stated the following, quote, I did not write the police report. I don't remember what all was put into that. I don't know who put it, I don't know what investigator. You're going to have to bring them in and ask them. When pressed further about Josh's actions towards his sisters, Jim Bob grew aggravated and said, quote, it was a very difficult time in our family's life. And I'll say this, when we went to the Child Safety Center, they told us all this would be kept confidential. And so for you guys to use a tabloid to bring it back up is very unprofessional. Jim Bob would spend his time on the stand dismissing and excusing Josh's behavior while completely undermining the victim's pain and trauma. During Josh's trial, his team unsuccessfully attempted to pin the crime on Caleb Williams, who was a family friend and someone who worked for Josh at various times at the car lot. There was an overwhelming amount of evidence against Josh, being that his phone was present at the time of download, his location was also being at the car lot during time of download, and with that said evidence, Josh was found guilty. Prior to his sentencing, several people wrote letters to the judge vouching for Josh's character and admirable qualities. His wife Anna wrote the following letter, quote, Your Honor, I am writing regarding my husband Joshua Duggar, who will come before you for sentencing. As his spouse of more than 13 years, thank you for taking the time to allow me to share about the man I know and love. Joshua and I met nearly 16 years ago. As our friendship grew over the next 2 years, I saw what I know to be even more true today, that Joshua is considerate, respectful, quick to forgive, patient, and genuinely the kindest person I know. We were happily married on September 26, 2008. During our first few years of marriage, Joshua and I enjoyed working together at our used car lot in Springdale. There, I admired my husband's diligence in his work and also his perspective, that people are more important than a quick sale. Joshua would often spend hours out of his day chatting with and listening to various homeless people who would pass by on the sidewalk, and many of our customers also became our friends. It didn't matter who you were or where you came from. Joshua cared for each person because they are created in the image of God. Joshua has worked hard to provide for me and our now 7 children. But the happiest part of the day by far is when Daddy comes home from work and his cheerful voice fills the house. Hey guys, how's it going? What did you learn about in school today? Are usually the conversation starters in between greeting each of our children. Joshua is an engaged dad who gladly throws a football with his sons, listens to our daughters play a new song they have learned on the piano, helps answer homework questions, or lends a hand sweeping up spilled crackers. He is a kind, loving, supportive, and caring father and husband, his primary focus in life. My children and I rely on Joshua for financial, emotional, and physical support. Many others depend on Joshua too. Joshua is a man who frequently volunteers his time, services, and resources, striving to contribute to our community and people in need. Joshua embodies the quote from Ronald Reagan, "There is no limit to the amount of good you can do if you don't care who gets the credit." Joshua is quick to step in and do whatever he can to be a team builder and help others accomplish their goals without ever needing to receive recognition or praise. Thank you, Your Honor, for taking these thoughts into consideration. Joshua is surrounded by people who will encourage him to continue to become the best man, father, and employer he can be. I ask that you consider reuniting us as a family again soon. I understand the seriousness of this matter. However, I respectfully ask that you take this letter into consideration when determining a fair sentence. Thank you, Anna Duggar. After receiving several letters on Josh's behalf, Judge Brooks sentenced him to 12.5 years in federal prison.
No one is above the law, and that's what this case demonstrates.
Now, once he is released from federal prison, he will spend the next 20 years on supervised release with several conditions. Now, some of those include registering as a sex offender. The judge based his decision off 3 categories, which is content, community, and conduct. Now, in the content category, the judge mentioned how Duggar had less than 600 images, which he says is significantly lower than the average of more than 4,000. However, the judge says the type of images Duggar had are some of the worst he has seen, saying that he cannot get some of the images out of his head. And as far as conduct, the judge mentioned how Duggar went to extreme lengths to make sure that his activity was undetectable. He also looked at Duggar's past of physical abuse with children as young as age 5. And with community, the judge looked at whether the images were shared, which the judge says Duggar showed those images on the dark web with peers. The judge also took into account public safety and compared similar sentences with offense levels of 39 like Duggar's. Now, the average in the nation for those offense levels is 192 months, so Duggar got a bit less with that 12 years. The judge did say, quote, "The punishment is sufficient but not greater than necessary."
We know that this sentence isn't going to take away the suffering and the pain that they've already felt from this abuse. But it is our hope that this sentence sheds light on this very dark criminal conduct, because every single time these files are traded, shared, and downloaded online, those same children are victimized all over again.
Since Josh's sentencing, several family members have spoken out against him.
I know a lot of people are also trying to process what's taken place and put that in a grid of their worldview and how do you view this, especially given the fact that Josh claimed to be a Christian and was a high-profile Christian at that. But the higher the platform, the harder the fall. And when hypocrisy is exposed, the temptation for many is going to be to look at Jesus himself and to doubt his integrity. Ginger and I spoke to this in our initial statement regarding Josh when he was convicted. We talked about a professing follower of Jesus being exposed as a hypocrite. The response of many will be to challenge the integrity of Jesus himself, questioning the legitimacy of a Savior whose so-called followers privately delight in the sins that they publicly denounce. And sadly, Josh's life has proven to be one of a hypocrite. One thing in public, another thing in private. I found Judge Brooks' words to Josh quite profound. He essentially said, "Who you are in private is who you truly are." The integrity of a person is known by how you behave when no one is looking. So here are a few things that need to be made crystal clear in a situation like this. Number one, God is a God of justice. Genuine Christians must be the first to defend the poor, the weak, the vulnerable, the hurting, the victims. Why? Because Christianity defends victims. True Christianity reflects the heart of Christ himself, a heart that defines justice. So if you take advantage of the vulnerable for your own pleasure and gain, you should be terrified of Jesus, which means that my brother-in-law will one day stand before the judgment seat of Christ and have to give account for his actions, and I fear for him. But so will every other person. And I think that needs to be remembered in this scenario. God is a God of justice across the boards. But here's the second reality that needs to be declared. Josh can be forgiven, but that in no way erases the demand for his crimes to be punished. Forgiveness never means that temporal consequences disappear. In fact, the one who has truly been rescued by God through the gospel, the person who has truly repented of their sin, will willingly embrace any temporal consequences for sin and see them as right and necessary. In fact, it would be a miscarriage of justice for a guilty criminal to be let back into the public, which means the convicted criminal will not ask for injustice, for his crimes to go unpunished because of God's forgiveness, but they will ask for their crimes to be punished, knowing that it is right and it reflects the righteousness of God's justice. Genuine repentance for a man like Josh Duggar, for anyone, would be very obvious to everyone.
Jim, Bob, and Michelle Duggar spent years trying to shield their son from the consequences of his actions. They spent years blaming innocent bystanders and dismissing the true victims in this case. After decades of running from justice, justice finally caught up.
The Lord is nigh unto them that are of a broken heart, and saveth such as be of a contrite spirit. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. These are the verses that I prayed for Josh. And I wrote a letter to Josh recently. And I said, Dear Joshua, I have enclosed to him nothing between my soul and the Savior. I've been singing and praying this to the Lord on your behalf. God inhabits the praise of his people. He is present in praise. May this hymn be your prayer to God as he carries you through. Your father and I had a private conversation, and then we prayed for you. Daddy suggested that I should talk to you, but I felt like God said, no, I want you to talk to me. And I cried out on your behalf. These very scriptures, a broken and a contrite heart you will not despise. Oh God, please have mercy. God is at work, Joshua. When he exposes sin, it is for the purpose of restoration. I'm confident that this will not destroy you. It is meant for good, to work the will of the Father in your life and in the lives of many others, including us, your family.